Hi, welcome to Raw TV, Real and Willing Television. I'm Jacob Kelly.
And I'm Rebecca Vargas. And it being Palm Sunday, we see all those Easter bunnies and, you know, those little chicks in all the stores. Kids are expecting their Easter baskets. How did you celebrate as a kid?
I know, I remember, I didn't really have much of we didn't really celebrate it too much other than going to church. I remember there was times whenever I loathed Easter just because I had to, my mom would wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, we have to go to sunrise, and we just sit outside and watch the sunrise.
Sunrise? What's that?
Yeah, and she would, I don't know. I honestly, I never went to a sunrise service, but I guess there's services that have to do with oh, he came, honestly, I really don't know. But I really don't know why churches have sunrise services, and that's probably,
I've never done that. I woke up in the morning to my Easter basket. Yeah. It was like this glorious thing on my dresser.
You probably got the huge chocolate bunnies that are that big. I never,
awesome.
I remember one time, I can only remember one time that I actually got a sweet Easter basket. And then the only other memory I have with Easter is it was weird because we did an Easter egg hunt at my church, which usually churches have a big problem with because that's mixing your pagan religion with painting eggs with,
That's what I mean.
church.
I don't even know, now thinking about it as I'm older, obviously, I wonder, where did all this come from? It's something I've never really researched. How did the Easter bunny come about when Easter's about Jesus dying on the cross and then rising again? How does that come out of that,
Same thing could be with Christmas.
Maybe with spring coming or something.
That's true. That's true. That's a good thing.
I don't know.
Because I heard somewhere that it had to do with some kind of season of fertility or something like that.
Oh,
it had
yeah.
to do with.
I could see that.
Yeah. I heard somewhere that had to do with fertility, birth. That's whenever. I don't really know. I was born in April, so I guess it could be a season of fertility. I guess, but I don't know.
Because it's all about you.
Yeah, right. That's what I mean. God said, I'm just April, Easter, Jacob's born. That's all that matters. That's right.
Did you ever take a picture with the Easter bunny?
Oh my goodness. I actually remember, I actually recently got a picture taken. I was at work, and my mom, we went into this pharmacy, and there was this huge Easter bunny. I feel bad for whoever's in the costume, but they were passing out all this candy, which was cool. Everyone wants candy. But so I remember my mom's I want to get you with a picture of an Easter bunny, and I just got off work, and I'm in my work clothes.
Wait, how old were you?
I was, I don't know, I was probably 18. So my mom pulled out her cell phone, and she was like, I want to take a picture with you and the Easter bunny.
Oh, was that your first picture ever with the Easter bunny?
I don't know, probably, because that was probably the first time my mom was like, oh, it's not pagan, just take one, it's funny, you know what I mean? My mom was usually the one that was like, no Easter egg, and my dad was like, go find the eggs, they're out in the yard.
Well, yeah. That stuff is all fun stuff, and that's great to celebrate. But it is about Jesus, and that is why we have Ed Diaz on the show with us. He's from Search Ministries, and he's going to be talking to us with his wife about sacrifice and what that really means. So don't go away.
Welcome back, guys. We're here with Ed and Gwen Diaz. You guys are a part of Search Ministries. Can you guys tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Search Ministries is about 35 years old. We grew out of Young Life, which is a national organization. We have about 55 couples that work in about 30 cities. We're spread all over the country. Our real focus is relational evangelism with the business and professional people. So most of my week I spend in small groups with businessmen, but I'm also fortunate to be able to speak and teach in churches and preach around all over Central Florida and the rest of the country.
What kind of issues do you dig deep into when you teach?
We do a lot of the tough questions. How do we know God exists? If God does exist, why do bad things happen to good people? Why do we think the Bible is true? Is Jesus really who he said he was? Those kind of things. We tried to give them safe places where adults can ask those questions and interact with them over time, build relationships, and when the time is right, share Christ with them.
Well, you said your ministry grew out of Young Life. So is it specifically geared towards youth, or is it?
Well, no, actually, it's specifically geared toward adults. We might be better called Old Life, but Search is the name of the mission, and our focus is adults. Our purpose statement includes the phrase equipping adults through modeling and training, and that's our goal.
That's Good. Can you tell us a little bit about your family? We hear that they are very accomplished.
We have 4 sons. So
Matthew,
our house
Mark,
is,
Luke, and John.
No. But you should have seen Easter at our house. It was crazy
Yeah.
with the whole Easter egg basket thing and the scavenger hunt to find them. And usually it was in the
Yes.
dryer because I couldn't find anywhere else to
Else to
hide
hide them.
4 baskets at one place. And the oldest is Zach, and he and Heather live here in town. They have 4 little children, and he's a home builder. Our second oldest is Matthew, or Matty, and he is a baseball player with the
Wow.
Braves.
Oh, wow.
He's an outfielder with the Atlanta Braves, and he and Leslie live in Winter Haven. They have 3 children. And then there's Ben, and he and Lydia live in Dallas. They have 2 little girls and 1 on the way. And he is finishing up undergrad still, working full-time while he's doing it. It's taking him a little longer than most. And then he plans to go to seminary.
Oh, that's good.
And Johnny is our youngest. Johnny lives in Nashville with Libby, and he's a professional Christian musician.
Yes, we had him on
Wow.
the show a couple seasons ago.
Yeah, that's awesome. Were all your grandkids there at Easter there too? Were they all running around? Was it?
We still do
hectic.
Easters, some at our house. Mostly they do it at their own homes now,
Okay.
where they get the baskets. We just have a little extra at our house when they show up on Easter Sunday.
Well, you know what? This being Palm Sunday that we're celebrating, what is that significance to you and your family?
Well, Palm Sunday's big for me. I think if you study the Bible, it's the official presentation of Jesus as the King of Israel. And he rides in on this donkey, the colt of a donkey. His followers are yelling, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, Baruch haba Hashem Adonai." And out of the temple area come the priests and the Pharisees, and they ask him to have his disciples stop. And he says, if I have them stop, even the stones will cry out. Because it is the day predicted by Daniel in chapter 9, hundreds of years before, when the Messiah was to show up in Jerusalem. It's called Palm Sunday because they waved palm branches. That's an interesting thing because they were at Passover, and Passover did not have palm branches in it. Rather, the Feast of Tabernacles was associated with palm branches because they would use them to build tents or tabernacles where they lived during this week-long feast in Jerusalem. So the people in the city thought Jesus was coming as the king to conquer Rome and establish his kingdom and fulfill the Feast of Tabernacles. It is the feast of the kingdom.
Yeah.
But Jesus had to come in his first coming to be our Passover lamb. And so they were a little bit out of order, but their hearts were right, and the Palm Sunday comes out of them waving palm branches. It's a reference to the book of Leviticus. I think it's chapter 23.
Wow.
Wow.
I didn't really know any of
I
that.
didn't- yeah, I just thought they were just throwing palm trees
Yeah,
down. So hey,
well.
let's continue to do it for the rest of us.
So he would get muddy or something.
Right,
Yeah.
right, yeah, that's
They did
that's
put
what I
their
was
coats on the
expecting.
ground. It was a way to welcome a king.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was their version of
And that's crazy
sacrificing.
because it's just a week later and
5 days later, some probably in the same crowd were yelling, "Crucify him, crucify him."
yeah. Talking about that, Jesus did the ultimate sacrifice for us. What do you believe sacrifice is, the definition of sacrifice, and what does it mean for us to sacrifice?
Sure. Sacrifice is usually associated with giving something up. In Jesus' case, he gave up the ultimate. He gave up his life for us. And as a result, we can choose to make sacrifices for him. I think it's important for a Christian to remember that we can choose to do that out of love, even out of obedience, but it doesn't earn us any more favor with God. God doesn't earn us any more, love us any more when we do sacrifice. He doesn't love us any less because we don't sacrifice. But I think it's just an act of devotion, obedience, worship. So it's a great picture, and I think it's a reflection of what Jesus has done for us. Love is sacrifice.
Yeah. Do you think that we're supposed to sacrifice just one thing or multiple things? And does that mean we do it for a time or just a short amount of time, like a whole time?
Well, that's a big question. In
Yeah.
the New Testament, the book of Romans says, "I urge you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." So part of our worship of the Lord ought to be on a day-to-day basis to offer ourselves to God. And Vance Hafner said once, the problem with the living sacrifice is it keeps crawling off the altar.
Yeah.
Every day I've got to wake up. Every day I've got to say, Lord, I want to live this day for you. I want this to be about you and not about me.
What do you think that's supposed to look like, though? Like, do you think of anything tangible that's supposed
Well,
to
in
look
the
like?
Bible, you can see so many examples of it. Like Abraham, when he was called, he was asked to give up 3 things: his family, his land, and I can't remember the third one. And to go where God had wanted him to go. Everybody had to give up something on their road to this walk with God, and it still continues to today.
Well, when we get back, we're going to first hear from Candace and Amanda with our top 10. So don't go away.
Hey guys, I'm Candace.
And I'm Amanda.
And here is the top 10 most ridiculous things to fast. Number 10 are your friends. I've actually seen this before. Someone has fasted their friends, and I don't think it's a good idea.
So
Your friends
sad.
need you, you need your friends.
Yeah.
So that's
Number 9, water. That's not good for you.
unhealthy.
It's, unhealthy. Don't do that.
Yeah.
At all.
Number 8 is talking. Awkward. Yeah.
Awkward. Number 7, work. That's going to have some negative ramifications in your life, so you might want to avoid that one.
Yes, definitely. Number 6 is swearing. If you have to fast swearing in order to be closer to God, I think we have a difficult problem there.
Yeah. Number 5, homework. Education is important, so you might not want to do that to yourself. Maybe.
Good plan. Number 4 is shaving, especially for girls. This is never an option. I don't think the
icky.
Lord wants you to stop shaving.
That's gross.
So no.
Number 3, smoking. If you're gonna fast that, just keep going.
Fast it for
that
life.
forever.
Yes.
For the rest of forever. Yeah.
Number 2 is showering. Please shower for yourself, for others, for
us.
the Lord.
For us. That's no. And number 1, TV, because then you wouldn't be watching us. So here we go. And that was our top 10.
Thanks, guys, so much. So, how do you know what and when God is calling you to sacrifice?
That's a great question, and there is a difference in the Old Testament and the New Testament. You know, the Old Testament, God would often call the nation of Israel to sacrifice something very external. In the New Testament, most of our sacrifices are more internal. Things like fasting are to be done without anybody knowing why, for instance. It's an individual thing as opposed to a national thing.
And individually, I'm not someone who's ever really heard God speak audibly, but I do know that there are times that He has prompted me to give something up. And I'll never forget the time we were in seminary. We had just graduated. Ed had just graduated from seminary. I put him through. He graduated.
It was a sacrifice.
That was a
That's good.
sacrifice, yes.
Proud of you.
But we were working hard that summer at a camp to make some money, and we were going to move to Portland, Oregon to begin a ministry called Walk Through the Bible Ministries. And we wanted to earn enough money to at least pay for a couple months' rent, so we had done that. And just before we left, one of the ladies who was at the camp where we worked, her refrigerator and freezer broke, and she was a widow and she was raising a 14-year-old son, and they had no food. She had no money to buy another one, and so she asked us all to please pray about it. So we promised we would definitely pray about this. And that day when I was praying hard that she would be able to have money for a refrigerator, I happened to notice how much money we had in our bank account, and I happened to go into the store and notice that refrigerators were to the penny that amount.
Wow.
And I kind of began to get a hint that maybe we were supposed to do something about that. And so it was just a way of God putting circumstances together and pulling our hearts. And it was really hard to do. I kind of had this celestial standoff with God. Well, if you'll give me more money, then I will gladly give this to her.
That's true.
But eventually He won, and we gave it, and God supplied more than 2 months rent
Wow.
for us. He gave us a home to live in with a family when we got to Oregon.
So do you think that sacrificing has to do with the Holy Spirit prompting you? Or in other cases, like the top 10, it could be something that's getting in the way of you and God. Is it something you do for yourself?
I think it can be both. I mean, the Holy Spirit prompts us. We also have the scriptures to encourage us along certain areas, and as God works in different parts of your life, there may be something that you're prompted to sacrifice or give up or give to God in a way that you haven't done it before. Again, in the Old Testament, they didn't have the Holy Spirit. He didn't indwell the believer. He would come and go as he pleased.
That's true.
So they had to deal more with externals and the edicts of the king. You know, Jehoshaphat would call the whole nation to fast for a particular cause. In the New Testament, it's a more relational thing. And again, I think it's more of an individual thing.
Yeah. Why do we sacrifice at all, though? If Jesus made that ultimate sacrifice, what's the point?
I think it's more a point of devotion, a sense of giving back to Him. You can't outgive God. And it really, if you think about what love is sacrifice. Love is doing what's best for the other person in spite of the consequences for me. And if we really love God, I'll do what's best for Him. I won't let anything come in between God and me. Otherwise, it's an idol. And so there are times when God might prompt me to get rid of something that's between God and me so that I can move on in my walk with Him. My relationship with Him will deepen.
Yeah. Well, a question I know whenever you start thinking about sacrificing, why do we have to sacrifice if Jesus made the ultimate sacrifice?
I think like Ed was saying, it opens up space in our life for him to fill it with things. Instead of us always being the ones filling our life, it gives him that space to work inside of us. And when the rich young ruler was asked to sacrifice what he had and give it to the poor, he couldn't make that sacrifice. So he didn't get the blessing that God could have given him and would have given him in his life if he had been willing to give that up. Sacrifice is just making room for God, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a difference between sacrifice and fasting, or if they go together?
They're probably opposite sides of the same coin. I think fasting can be a way to sacrifice. It can be for a specific reason. Again, in the Old Testament, they would fast because they needed protection from God over their enemies, or they needed water for their crops. But again, in the New Testament, in the Sermon on the Mount particularly, Jesus says, when you fast, don't let anybody know. You know, it has to do the same with prayer. You know, your Father who sees in secret will reward you. If you fast, don't look gaunt and haggard and starving and with your hair all mussed. Make sure you look good and people don't know you're fasting. It's a personal thing between you and the Lord.
Yeah. What do you think is the point of fasting if you already have a personal walk with Christ, you're praying all the time, you're in devotion? Why do you think there's a need for fasting?
I think whether you're fasting food or whether you're fasting something else, you know, it's a way of saying, hey, this is not as important as you, God, and particularly if I'm fasting food, it doesn't look like I do it very often, but when I get hungry, it prompts me to spend time with the Lord that I may not spend otherwise.
It's true.
Yeah.
I think He's hungry for us.
So many people think it's a way of us trying to get God to focus on us. Look what we're doing. We're doing this. Please bless us. And it's not. It's our way of focusing on Him. It's a way of keeping our attention on Him.
Do you think there's a difference between not having having a lack of discipline and then choosing to sacrifice something? Like maybe you decide to choose to sacrifice TV or Facebook, and is there a difference between that, do you think, of like letting it go completely because you don't have any discipline in your life, or is it just a sacrifice for a time?
I think it can be both. I think, you know, again, choosing to say give up Facebook for a week, or I have a son that once a month they do a no signal weekend. They don't do anything online, they don't watch TV, and they just take that time and devote it to the Lord, and they devote it to each other. You know, again, on the other hand, it can be a lack of discipline. You know, some people aren't very good at moderation. My wife is great at moderation, but you know, there are times when you need to say, okay, I'm just going to cut that off and not do that at all anymore. I think, again, the Lord will prompt you in that area.
What about, we know that we have our personal fasting, as you were saying, it's supposed to be more of a personal, but what about when churches or even communities come together and say, hey, let's all fast together? What do you think is the purpose behind that?
In the New Testament, there are very few instances where the church as a corporate body will fast, and there's not much instruction about it. Again, I think it's great if a church has something that they need as a group to be obedient about or to be in greater prayer about, to ask people to say, hey, let's fast about this. And again, God can get our attention as a group and move us as a group toward a particular goal. I think that's really the way it would be used.
Yeah, that's great. Do you think that every person should feel that they need to fast too? Like if a church is asking you to, or do you think it's also personal to decide if you want to?
I mean, you have to decide before the Lord. But again, if I'm a part of a body of believers and they're all doing it, I probably will just do it out of the idea of being in fellowship with them and the sense of unity. We want to have unity in the Spirit.
That's true. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
The other day I was thinking about sacrifice. What does it mean to sacrifice? What does it look like to sacrifice sometimes? And a lot of times we think about the ultimate sacrifice and we just go straight to that. And when I think about sacrifice, the definition that comes to mind is giving up something of great value to you for something of lesser value to you. And so I kind of sat back and I had to think to myself, okay, like have I actually sacrificed anything? Have I actually given up something of great value for something of lesser value for the benefit of others? I'd probably say 8 out of 10 times, no, I haven't. Now I gotta ask myself, do I know what it looks like to sacrifice? Do I know how to properly sacrifice? I think these are questions that we have to ask ourselves a lot of times. What do you think? This is food for thought. Chew on that.
Welcome back. Here we're talking about sacrifice, and I know that we are a completely different generation. So what is something that you guys have sacrificed before, and was it hard?
Well, I've sacrificed food for a fast before, and it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Very hard.
Yeah,
sacrificed it.
I've done that for
Yeah.
for a 24-hour period, and by the end of the day, no one wanted to be around me. So I don't know if it was exactly like beneficial because I was so
No.
grouchy by the end of the day.
I've thought about that too, because
Yeah.
when you fast or when you sacrifice, you know, it's supposed to bring you closer to God, but it makes me
Yeah.
so angry, and I get so
And
upset
weak.
that
Yeah.
I get really weak. So
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I've done like one meal before, and I felt like it was hard because I'm always hungry. I feel like I didn't realize
Yeah.
like how hungry I get.
Yeah.
Instead, I just like really focused. I'm like, okay, if I'm gonna fast this, then I'm gonna do it, and I'm
Yeah.
gonna pray. So I really did go into that devotion time and that prayer time, and I kind of felt good about it, like just feeling like this is what it means to sacrifice. So I did, but I was hungry, so that was
Yeah.
definitely hard. Not going to lie.
I used to sacrifice food. Like I used to do this thing called Fast Friday, where some in like our Christian club in our school, we would try to get together, and some of us would do Fast Fridays. And I know I would fast from the morning. I wouldn't eat breakfast, lunch, and until usually 5 o'clock. And I know for me it was the same way. Like I just drank water all day. I was so grouchy, and I have this thing, I will get sick if I do not eat all day. So I was in the same point of, God, I really, really need you. But then at the end of the day, I was like, wow, I really feel like I came to a good point of fasting or sacrifice, because I was completely leaning on God. God, I need you to get me through this 2 o'clock like doze. Like, I have no calories or anything to burn right now to give me energy.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And
oh
can you
my
imagine
goodness.
God or Jesus did it for 40 days?
God.
I was
Oh
just
my
thinking about it. I'm like, I'm
goodness.
fasting one meal and I'm gonna
Probably
die.
just lay in
Sometimes I
bed.
wonder if he just kind of laughs, like, really? You can't give up one meal?
Yeah.
And we're like
Without it being a big
my
deal.
suffering,
goodness.
I
you
know,
know?
I
But I
know.
guess that's the point, is to
Yeah.
feel like desperation for God, so that
Yeah.
we're leaning on him, because we lean on so many other things that we don't realize, like
Yeah.
one meal.
Yeah.
What do you think would be the hardest thing to sacrifice? Like if you could think about it right now and letting it go for like maybe a week or like letting it go forever or something, what would be the hardest thing?
I still say food.
Yeah.
Like food?
Well, I don't
Yeah.
think you exactly could give that up forever. So
Yeah.
Like something specific? I think I would die if I had to give up chocolate forever.
that would be a
Okay.
bummer.
Probably Red Bull right now for me, honestly. I'm like embarrassed to say that. My mom would kill me if she knew I drank Red Bull.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're a college student and you're going to work at the same
True. And
time,
you don't like coffee.
you need energy, and it's like a shame that you're so dependent on something like that. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah, I
love
could
coffee
probably
too.
say the
Coffee
same thing
is
about
literally
that.
my
That-
daily
it's-
sustenance. Like
Red Bull is
Yeah.
my coffee, so sacrificing Red Bull.
Starbucks
I don't
is
know
my
if I
second
could do
home.
that.
Yeah. But how do you guys know when like God is actually calling you to sacrifice something? And then how do you know what that is? Have you ever like heard him audibly tell you, or through a sign, or how do you know?
You know, I've always asked that question, because people have come up to me and they're like, you know, God is calling me to sacrifice this, or God is leading me to do this, but I've never heard the audible voice of God tell me, Candace, give this up, or it's
Yeah.
time to, you know, move on to something else. But it's almost like an urge in your spirit,
Yeah.
and it's almost like you get this sense that God is speaking to you,
Yeah.
saying, you know.
And I
it's-
think you know how the Lord speaks to you, like individually, like in your walk. So I think it's got to be along the same lines. Like if you know that that's how the Lord deals with you, then you're gonna know when He does.
What
Yeah.
about like the kind of, honestly, me and my friend PJ used to, not to be like cynical, but we used to like almost laugh at the idea of people fasting Facebook, or just things that you're like, really? Like Facebook? Just things like that.
I get upset about that.
I know,
Jacob,
I'm sorry.
because-
but
Why do you
it's
get
just-
upset?
Because social networking is just so consuming, I feel like. And I've realized, like, even in my own life, I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't consume me. But now having it on your phone and being able to access it, and not
my
only that, like
gosh.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, all these outlets that we have to like just be consumed by. And I'm like, I don't know when I'm supposed to fast. And sometimes I was going into that stage where I'm like, I need to fast something. And I didn't hear an audible voice, but I'm like, what is it that's consuming my life? What do I need to get rid of that it would really bother me not having it? And I realized like how often I just turn on my phone and that's the first thing I look at.
Yeah.
And it's like constantly downtime all the time. And I'm like, I could, instead of doing that, I could probably be focusing on God more.
Well, see, I feel like even if I were to like fast Facebook, or I just got an iPhone for Christmas, right? So like I have access to Facebook, Pinterest, everything.
Yeah.
And I've noticed I'm constantly on my phone.
Yeah.
So something like that, if you would give that up,
Yeah.
you really would spend a lot more time in the Word.
And
or
I've
praying.
realized how much it works, and it just shows me like I'm so consumed in what people are doing in their lives, and sometimes I feel like I'm out of the loop. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on in people's lives, and it really shows
Yeah.
me Like, if I really care about certain people, you find out because you're friends with them. And it doesn't
Right.
matter, like, stop being nosy, stop being all
Stop
these other
stalking.
things.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's like, you really realize how dependent you are. And I'm like, I need to refocus on God. So this whole social networking thing, if you look at it on the surface, it's like, okay, that's dumb. Like, TV,
Yeah.
it's dumb. But when you really think about it, it's like, it's really, you know.
I think it's just, for me, the whole reason why I looked at it like that was because it's something where, once again, my idea of fasting was I got to the end of the day and I was like, God, I really need you. But whenever I would like think about, okay, if I fasted Facebook, here's my idea of fasting Facebook. Oh man, I can't check Facebook anymore. Okay, I'll just use something else to occupy my time. So it's not like, for me, it was never, I was leaning on God. God, please help me resist Facebook right now.
Well,
It
clearly
was
then
like,
that's different.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah.
You got to
Yeah.
replace it with your time
Like,
with God
yeah,
or
exactly.
focusing
So-
on your relationship.
Because I think if you're just like, I am not going to tweet from my phone today, that is obviously completely
Yeah.
different than like doing like a
I think
media
that's
fast.
more of what I had, you know, because for me, almost like sacrificing, being like, oh, I'm just gonna give up Facebook and spend that time with God. For me, I think I have ADD, so for me, it would be like, I'm not using Facebook. I'll just
Use something
write
else.
poetry or something like that, or
Well,
something.
let's talk about
you know.
this because, you know, it's kind of funny that we mentioned giving up Facebook would be like a sacrifice. That is kind of sad. That could
It is
almost be
sad
on
that
our
it
list
is.
of ridiculous
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
to fast.
Yeah.
But I mean, what would be something that would be like an actual sacrifice? Like, I've never felt God say, give this up for this period of time. I really haven't.
Yeah.
And I've wondered maybe I've just missed his voice or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you guys ever felt something huge like that God says, it's time for you to sacrifice this?
Not really.
Not anything like life shattering, but like I remember once, like I was going out to eat with some friends, and I really felt like the Lord was like, "There's somebody there that you need to buy their meal for them," and I was like, "Well, that's weird," and I was like looking around the restaurant. And I was like, "God, who? What?" And I saw like a dad with his 2 young daughters, and I have no idea what the situation was, but I just like asked for their waitress, and like I really felt like that was, and it was like a time in my life where money was tight, and I feel like the Lord like really calls you to give out of your lack. Because that's out of faith.
Yeah.
Like he wants to grow your faith. And I mean, I've never been in a time where like the Lord hasn't provided for me,
Yeah.
you know?
Right.
So
And he'll bless you through that. And you know what's really cool about that? Like just hearing God's voice in general. I think if we're just constantly living in that state of openness to God, that's when he'll speak to you. I don't think it's like, okay, I need to pray and like really hear from God, him telling me something specific or to fast something. I feel like if he wants you to fast something and you're open to him all the time, he'll put into your heart what it might be or to
Yeah.
do something specific.
and we're
Yeah.
supposed to live our lives as a living sacrifice,
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah,
that's
what
like
does that
another way
mean?
to look at it.
Yeah.
I think it means just every day just recommitting yourself like it's not about me, refocusing on what my life is about and God's sacrifice, and then living your life in that just humble kind of servant attitude. How can I see people through your eyes?
And I
You
think
know
a
what
lot
mean?
of times people get caught up in like, this is my week of fasting, and now like once their week of fasting is done, the sacrifice
go
is
back to
over, and they go back to their
Yeah.
old life.
I think something for the whole living sacrifice, I just remembered something that this evangelist that I really, he just inspired me. He said that Jesus didn't die on the cross so that we didn't have to. He died on the cross to show us how. And so for me, that was something that I was like, man, I constantly need to be
Eye-opening.
like living
Yeah.
my life as if I'm about to go die on the cross or something like that.
That's incredible. Well, that was a great discussion on sacrifice.
Great talk, guys.
Yeah.
Well, as you guys are celebrating this upcoming Easter, just don't forget that it's about God's sacrifice. It's about Jesus dying on the cross for us and him giving us new life. So don't forget that as you celebrate in all this craziness
Yeah.
and hype, you know?
Well, thanks guys so much for watching. Make sure you check out our Facebook for more show updates. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching Raw TV Southeastern. And as always, don't forget to
Live it raw.